Maya Raines arrived at Fort in the pre-dawn chill, the mist clinging to her uniform like a thin veil. Her boots struck the wet concrete in a quiet, steady rhythm, each step measured and deliberate. The other recruits were already gathered on the training field, stretching and joking nervously in the cold light. Whispers followed her as she approached, subtle at first, then louder, fueled by curiosity and a hint of ridicule. Some of the younger men craned their necks to look at the jagged scars lining her forearms and neck, as if expecting them to tell a story worth mocking. "She's new," one muttered to his buddy, the tone simultaneously uncertain and dismissive. "Look at those scars, ouch," another said, trying to smirk, but the nervousness in his voice betrayed him. Maya ignored them. She had grown accustomed to this kind of scrutiny. The laughter, the whispers, the casual cruelty, all of it had been constant in her life. She wasn't fragile, not even close. The scars weren't souvenirs of accidents or careless mistakes. They were marks of survival, evidence that she had faced things most people couldn't even imagine, let alone endure. Each line etched into her skin was a silent badge of battles fought in shadows, missions that were never acknowledged publicly, operations that existed only in classified files. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar knot of tension settle in her chest. The training that awaited them was designed to push even the strongest men to their limits, to break them, and then rebuild them into soldiers. Maya had done worse than this before. She had survived desert storms, jungle ambushes, and night missions where every step could be her last. Here, in a place where recruits were mocked for minor mistakes, she knew she would endure as she always had. Her eyes scanned the field. The obstacles loomed like silent sentinels, the climbing wall, the rope swings, the barbed wire crawl. Each challenge would test stamina, endurance, mental fortitude, and for some, sheer will to live. Maya tightened the straps of her rucksack, feeling the comforting weight of the training gear she had chosen herself. Equipment could be a crutch for the unprepared, a shield for the fearful. For her, it was a tool she knew how to master. The other recruits hadn't realized it yet, but she was already calculating the terrain, the angles, the timing. Every muscle in her body was aware, attuned to the task at hand. The mockery and laughter didn't reach her. Her mind was elsewhere, far beyond this field, reliving moments that had forged her. Moments that left scars, but also left her alive. As the whistle blew to signal the beginning of the day, a few of the recruits tried to show off. They sprinted ahead, their movements awkward with bravado. Maya followed at her own pace, smooth, controlled, and efficient. She didn't need to rush. Her body had learned the rhythm of endurance, the pattern of movement that conserved energy while maximizing output. By the time she reached the first obstacle, a towering climbing wall, she was already observing the technique of those who had gone before her. The easy route was tempting, but she ignored it. Efficiency and safety were secondary to adaptability and precision. "Move faster, newbie," someone shouted, half mocking, half panicking. Maya didn't respond. She began her ascent, her fingers finding purchase on the smallest holds. Her movements were precise, fluid, almost effortless. Every hand and arm told a story of resilience. Pain had been a constant companion, but pain was also a teacher, and she had listened well. She reached the top, looked down at the ground, and leapt gracefully to the next platform. Around her, some recruits were still struggling, their confidence faltering with every slip. During breaks, she remained quiet, keeping her distance from the gossiping groups. They called her, or fragile, behind her back, never daring to confront her directly. Yet even in isolation, she remained alert, scanning her surroundings, noting every weakness in others' technique, every opportunity for improvement. Maya had learned to thrive in solitude, to treat isolation not as punishment but as preparation. In the barracks that evening, the air smelled of sweat, wet uniforms, and the faint tang of fear. Recruits whispered, sharing rumors about her past. Some claimed she had been in a street gang. Others imagined she had survived a savage accident. Few dared to imagine the truth, that Maya Raines had been a part of missions so secretive they didn't officially exist. She traced her scars with quiet fingers, each line bringing back a memory. Some were of comrades lost in firefights, others of extraction missions gone wrong. She whispered their names softly, a ritual of remembrance. Pain, loss, and survival had all left their mark, and she carried them with dignity. Her mind wandered back to one particular mission, deep in enemy territory, where the odds were impossible, the terrain unforgiving, and every decision could mean death. She had crawled through mud, bloodied and exhausted, carrying a wounded teammate on her back, while explosions lit the sky in a terrifying display of chaos. That teammate survived because of her. That scar on her forearm was from a shrapnel wound that had nearly ended her life. And yet here she was, standing among people who had no idea what survival truly meant. The laughter of the day replayed in her mind, but it no longer stung. She had survived ridicule before. She had survived combat worse than any words could hurt. The weight of her experiences lent her a calm that most would never know. She knew that one day the world, or at least this field, would stop laughing. She would earn their respect, not by demanding it, but by being undeniable in her skill, her strength, and her resilience. As she lay down that night, exhaustion washing over her, she stared at the ceiling. The scars on her body reflected the dim light of the barracks, reminding her of the battles that had shaped her. Each line was a testament to endurance, to the will to survive when everything else failed. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deep and unbroken, fortified by the knowledge that she had already faced worse than mockery and had emerged intact. Tomorrow the field would call again. Tomorrow the recruits would try to test her limits. Tomorrow some would still whisper, some would still laugh. But Maya Raines would be ready. She had survived impossible odds, carried the weight of secret wars, and faced death countless times. Their laughter, temporary and meaningless, would meet a wall of experience and discipline they could not see, and one day they would understand the power behind the scars they mocked. For now she closed her eyes, letting the faint hum of the barracks lull her into rest, her body and mind preparing for the next challenge. She wasn't just a recruit with scars. She was a survivor, a soldier, and a force that no one here could underestimate. And when the day came that they realized who she truly was, the laughter would die in their throats. The morning sun had barely risen over fort when the recruits assembled on the training field again. Dew clung to the grass, sparkling faintly, but the warmth of the day hadn't yet arrived. The air smelled faintly of sweat, wet earth, and fear, a mixture familiar to anyone who had spent even a few days under the relentless intensity of special operations training. The recruits were restless, tired, and already tense from the previous day's exercises. Whispers about Maya Raines followed them like a shadow. "She's weird, isn't she?" muttered one young man, nervously adjusting his helmet. "Yeah, look at those scars. Must been some messed up accident," another replied, trying to sound casual but betraying curiosity. From across the field, Maya stood silently, observing. She had learned long ago that attention, whether cruel or admiring, was meaningless unless paired with respect. Their laughter, pointed and mocking, was like wind against stone. It moved over her without leaving a mark. Yet she made mental notes: who laughed, who whispered, who tried to assert dominance through words rather than skill. Every interaction was a piece of a puzzle, every glance an opportunity to learn the weaknesses of those around her. The day's first drill was a timed obstacle course. It was designed to break the unprepared, to expose weakness, and to punish hesitation. Maya didn't rush. She moved with calculated precision, each motion economical and efficient. She scaled the climbing wall with ease, swung across the rope obstacles with controlled momentum, and crawled under the barbed wire with fluid, practiced movements. Her scars gleamed faintly in the morning light, and a few of the recruits stared openly, their bravado faltering as they realized her skill was unmatched. During the rope climb, a recruit sneered, "Careful, scar girl, don't hurt yourself." His voice was loud, designed to draw laughs from the others. Maya's fingers tightened on the rope, her grip steady. She didn't look at him, she didn't need to. Her movements alone answered the question of strength. By the time she reached the top, the others were gasping, some struggling to hold their balance, others frozen mid-climb, their confidence crumbling under the quiet, undeniable power of her presence. By mid-morning, Maya's precision had begun to make the others uneasy. The mocking laughter persisted, but it had an edge of insecurity. Recruits who had initially thought her fragile began exchanging wary glances. Every stumble she avoided, every obstacle she completed flawlessly, eroded their perception of weakness. Yet the ridicule didn't stop. It merely shifted tone, now laced with nervous humor, a way for them to mask fear. "You're pretty quiet for someone with battle scars," one recruit called, attempting a grin. "You planning to talk or just climb all day?" Maya paused only for a moment, her eyes flicking toward him. Then she resumed, finishing the climb without a word. The silence that followed was heavier than any laughter could have been. Some of the recruits swallowed hard, realizing, perhaps too late, that this woman was no ordinary soldier. Lunch brought little reprieve. The barracks echoed with laughter and whispers as recruits recounted the morning drills, speculating about Maya's past. Some imagined fantastical stories, a childhood accident, a violent upbringing, or even criminal exploits. None came close to the truth. Maya ate quietly, keeping her head down, tracing a faint scar along her forearm absent-mindedly. Each line brought memories of missions that had been erased from official records. Every scar represented a life saved, a teammate pulled from the jaws of death, a near-fatal encounter with enemies who never knew her name. Her silence during lunch was deliberate. Words were unnecessary. The more she revealed, the less they would respect her. She had learned that true authority is shown through action, not conversation, and actions were coming. Soon enough, the field would provide her with opportunities to demonstrate skills that would turn ridicule into respect, whether they wanted it or not. The afternoon drills began with live fire exercises. Recruits moved cautiously through the terrain, nerves stretched tight. Maya's eyes scanned every shadow, every rise in the ground, every corner where danger could hide. She moved with an awareness that bordered on preternatural, every step precise, every motion calculated. When a fellow recruit fumbled and nearly tripped into a live target zone, Maya reacted instantly. She grabbed his arm, pulling him to safety in a motion so fluid it looked rehearsed, not instinctive. The young man's face turned pale as he realized how close he had come to disaster. "Thanks," he mumbled, unable to meet her eyes. Maya said nothing, simply nodded and moved on. She didn't need thanks. Her world was different from theirs. Life and death were matters of seconds and precision, not politeness or recognition. For them, this was a training exercise. For her, it was a reminder of what she had survived countless times over. By the end of the day, the other recruits were exhausted. Their laughter had diminished, replaced with quiet awe and unease. Even the instructors, normally unshakable, had begun to notice. There was something about Maya that couldn't be or tested, a calm, controlled intensity, a presence that demanded respect without demanding it. She didn't speak of her past. She didn't brag about her abilities. She simply existed in a way that made the others aware of their own inadequacies. Back in the barracks that night, the whispers continued, quieter now, tinged with uncertainty. Recruits speculated about her past, imagining stories wilder and darker than reality. But the truth was far more extraordinary. Maya had been part of operations that were so secret, so sensitive, that they weren't allowed to exist in official records. Missions where survival wasn't guaranteed, where failure meant death or disappearance. The scars that had drawn ridicule were trophies of endurance, proof that she had survived where most would have perished. Alone in her bunk, Maya traced the scars along her arm, each one bringing back vivid memories. Crawling through mud under enemy fire, carrying wounded comrades through forests alive with the danger of ambush, navigating terrain that would have broken ordinary soldiers. Pain and suffering had been constant companions, yet each trial had honed her, sharpened her reflexes, and forged an unbreakable will. She was alive because of discipline, preparation, and sheer determination, qualities invisible to those who mocked her for what they could see on the surface. Her thoughts drifted to the recruits, to the laughter and the whispers. They had no idea what true endurance was, No one here could measure the weight of decisions that determined life and death in the field, the burden of responsibility for those who depended on you, the ever-present knowledge that a single mistake could be fatal. Their ridicule was meaningless. She had survived worse, far worse, and she would continue to do so. As sleep finally approached, exhaustion heavy in her limbs, Maya felt the familiar hum of readiness in her muscles. Tomorrow would bring more drills, more tests, more whispers, and yet she would remain unshaken. The field was temporary, the laughter fleeting, but her scars, her experience, and her survival were permanent. They marked her as someone who had walked through fire and emerged intact, a silent force in a world that often failed to recognize true strength. And so, as the barracks lights dimmed and the night settled over Fort, Maya Raines closed her eyes. Tomorrow, the world would continue to underestimate her, but she had learned long ago that respect is earned in silence and action, not in words. They laughed at her scars today. Tomorrow, she would show them what those scars truly represented. The morning sun burned through a pale sky as the recruits assembled on the main training field. Mist clung to the ground, curling around the edges of obstacles like ghostly fingers. Maya Raines stood at the rear of the line, calm and unyielding, her scars catching the early light. She had already earned the respect of some instructors, though the bulk of her peers still whispered behind her back, their curiosity tinged with unease. Today, however, a presence was coming that would change everything. A convoy of sleek black SUVs rolled onto the compound, engines low and throaty, demanding attention without a single word. Recruits straightened instinctively, some fumbling to adjust their helmets and gear, while Maya simply observed. She had seen visitors before, men and women of rank who believed authority alone commanded respect. This presence, however, was different. It carried weight beyond uniform or title. General stepped from the lead vehicle. His uniform was immaculate, his boots polished to a mirror shine. He walked with measured steps, his presence radiating authority that made even the instructors pause. Eyes that had seen decades of combat and covert operations scanned the field, assessing, calculating, weighing everything in a single glance. When his gaze fell on Maya, it lingered longer than anyone expected. A flicker of recognition passed through his eyes, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to unsettle the nearby instructors. He walked toward the formation, the crunch of gravel under his boots punctuating each step like the beat of a drum. The recruits held their breath, sensing tension but unable to place its source. Whispers began to circulate quietly. "Who is that? He seems focused on her." Some of the bolder recruits, those who had mocked Maya the day before, exchanged nervous glances. Prideful bravado faltered as unease crept in. Maya remained still, a statue amid the shuffle of nervous soldiers. Her eyes followed him, unwavering, as if she too understood the weight of his presence. She had met men like this before, commanders who wielded authority not just through orders but through presence alone. She neither flinched nor bowed, she simply observed. The general paused before her, studying her with a measured intensity. A bead of sweat rolled down the side of his temple, unnoticed in the heat of the morning sun. "Raines," he muttered quietly, almost to himself. The word carried gravity, weight, history. The instructors nearby stiffened, unsure of how to respond. Some of them had heard rumors of her past, but nothing concrete, nothing official. And yet, recognition left no room for doubt. She was someone who had walked through shadows most could not imagine, someone whose skills had been forged in missions that didn't officially exist. The recruits noticed the pause. Their laughter and whispers of mockery fell silent, replaced by unease and curiosity. Even the instructors, normally stoic and unshakable, exchanged subtle, uneasy glances. This was no ordinary recruit. She had already survived tests they couldn't imagine. Now she had captured the attention of the general himself. His gaze swept the formation slowly, like a predator assessing its environment. When it returned to Maya, there was no judgment in his eyes, only recognition, acknowledgement of experience, skill, and survival. He turned his head slightly and muttered something to one of his aides, a name whispered under his breath, reverent and loaded with unspoken history. The aide nodded and stepped back, understanding without question. A tension settled over the field, palpable and electric, as though the air itself recognized the weight of unspoken truths. The recruit's whispers grew quieter, tentative. He knows her, one muttered, barely audible. Another shook his head, disbelief etched across his face. No way, she's just a recruit, right? But even as he said it, his eyes betrayed fear and uncertainty. Something about Maya had shifted, the subtle, unshakable aura that surrounded her had deepened now that the general had acknowledged it. Training resumed, but the atmosphere had irrevocably changed. Where there had once been mockery and whispers of cruelty, there was now hesitation, cautious respect. Recruits approached her with a new awareness, measuring every word, every gesture, and every glance. They no longer laughed, no longer mocked. They didn't yet understand her, but instinctively they knew she was untouchable. The general watched from the sidelines, occasionally making notes, his eyes flicking to Maya with an intensity that suggested calculation and assessment. Occasionally, he would nod subtly to instructors, who followed his silent cues with precise movements, adjusting the course slightly, observing her interactions without intervening. Every action on the field seemed, every decision observed. The recruits couldn't comprehend why this quiet woman commanded such attention, but the shift was undeniable. During a timed obstacle exercise, a recruit attempted to overtake Maya, hopping to assert dominance. He stumbled on the rope swing, nearly falling, and she passed effortlessly, her movements fluid, controlled, precise. The general's gaze narrowed slightly, noting her technique, her discipline, her calm under pressure. The observer's eyes, trained to detect flaws and weaknesses, found none. The young recruit, face red with embarrassment, scrambled to regain composure. For the first time, the fear of judgment outweighed the desire for ridicule. By mid-morning, the whispers among the recruits had shifted entirely. Curiosity replaced mockery, all replaced disbelief. One of the more confident soldiers finally asked under his breath, Who is she really? Another shook his head, murmuring, "No one jokes with her, not even the instructors, and the general, he knows her." Their uncertainty fed tension, and tension sharpened the edges of every movement on the field. The general finally approached Maya, stopping a few feet from her. He surveyed the group briefly before his eyes returned to her. "Reigns," he said again, this time louder, addressing her directly. The command was not an order nor a greeting, it was acknowledgement. Recognition of a past few had lived, a present few could comprehend, and a future few could imagine. Maya's expression remained calm, composed, unreadable. She didn't flinch or smile. She merely stood at attention, shoulders squared, body poised. She had survived more dangerous situations than this field could ever offer. She understood the weight of his gaze. It carried the knowledge of lives saved, operations executed in shadows, and the silence that she was more than what these recruits could comprehend. The general turned to the instructors, his tone quiet but firm. "Leave her be. Observe, but don't interfere. She knows what she's doing." The instructors nodded, visibly uneasy but compliant. The field, once a ground for mockery and testing, had become a stage where history silently acknowledged the living legend in their midst. For the recruits, the day passed differently. Every obstacle was now measured not against their peers, but against Maya, the silent soldier who moved with precision and control that imagination. Some whispered, some stared, some tried to follow her example, but all were aware of her unspoken authority. Even without words, she had transformed the field from a place of judgment and ridicule into one where skill, experience, and silent dominance demanded recognition. By late afternoon, the convoy of SUVs returned and the general prepared to leave. As he climbed back into his vehicle, his eyes met Maya's once more. There was no judgment, no conversation, only acknowledgement. The recruits watched in stunned silence as he drove away, leaving behind a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Mockery had been replaced with respect, fear, and curiosity, and the field would never be the same. That night in the barracks, whispers filled the air again, but this time they were different. "He knows her," one recruit said reverently. She's not just a recruit, she's something else." Another nodded, shivering slightly. For the first time, Maya's scars were seen not as weaknesses, but as symbols of experience, endurance, and survival. The field had revealed her skill, but the general's recognition had revealed the truth. She was untouchable, even if no one yet understood why. Maya lay on her bunk that night, tracing her scars silently. The field had been a stage and the players unaware. But she knew the game was changing. The general's arrival had shifted the balance. The mockery, the whispers, the nervous curiosity, all were now irrelevant. The true test lay ahead in actions and survival, not in laughter, and Maya Raines had always thrived in tests where others failed. The day began quietly at Fort, but the tension in the air from the general's arrival the previous morning had lingered like a shadow. Instructors moved through the barracks with a heightened awareness, checking equipment, issuing orders, and exchanging subtle, knowing glances. Maya Raines remained calm, her scars catching the faint light of dawn as she prepared for the day's drills. She didn't need to speak to command attention. Her presence alone demanded it. Every recruit now watched her differently, their earlier mockery replaced with nervous curiosity, though none of them yet understood the depth of her history. The first exercise of the morning was a standard tactical drill, but it was quickly interrupted. An instructor entered the training area, holding a black folder marked classified eyes only. The bold red letters seemed to hum with importance, and a wave of unease rippled through the nearby recruits. The envelope bore Maya's name in a crisp, official script, and even the instructors stiffened when they saw it. Papers like this were not common. They carried information so secret that its very existence was considered highly sensitive. The instructor approached General, bowing slightly in deference. "Sir," he said quietly, "this just arrived for her. It's highly classified." His face remained calm, but his eyes narrowed slightly as he took the folder. He opened it with practiced precision, his fingers moving over the documents with the care of a man accustomed to handling information that could alter lives, missions, and even national security. Sections of the file were blacked out entirely, the ink absorbing light like shadows. Photographs, mission logs, and code names were visible in fragments, enough to tell a story of extraordinary skill and extreme risk, but leaving most details deliberately hidden. The instructor hesitated, glancing at Maya. "Sir, should we?" "No," said firmly. "Leave her be. Observe. She requested to start over. She's earned that right." His words were quiet, but they carried weight. The statement wasn't just about training. It was a declaration that Maya had already proven herself in ways that most could never understand. Maya watched silently, her expression unreadable. She had anticipated this moment. The folder, the attention, the realization that her past might finally intersect with the present. It was all part of a larger game. She didn't need validation. She never had. But the subtle shift in the room was undeniable. Whispers among the recruits stifled themselves as they sensed the change. Those who had laughed now looked uneasy, uncertain, unable to comprehend the significance of the folder or the authority behind the general's words. The general studied the file with methodical focus, eyes scanning page after page. Mission logs hinted at operations deep behind enemy lines, rescues executed under impossible conditions, and objectives completed that officially did not exist. The photographs were intentionally partial, showing only glimpses of Maya in action, crawling through mud, leading a squad, pulling injured teammates to safety. The visible scars on her arms and neck, once the source of ridicule, were now silent testaments to feats of endurance and bravery, far beyond the comprehension of her peers. An aide leaned in, whispering to the general, "Sir, most of them can't even imagine the kind of missions she's been on. They won't believe it without seeing it firsthand." His eyes flicked up, briefly meeting Maya's. In that moment there was recognition not of her as a recruit, not of her as a soldier, but of her as someone who had survived, thrived, and dominated situations designed to kill. "Let them watch," he said quietly. "They'll learn soon enough." Word of the file's contents spread like wildfire through the camp. Quiet conversations erupted in hushed tones. "Did you see that folder? It's her record. She's Black Ops. I thought that was impossible." The recruits who had once mocked her scars now avoided looking directly at her, unsure whether to speak, stare, or flee. Even the more confident soldiers began to measure their words, realizing that the person they had underestimated was untouchable, at least in terms of skill and experience. The day's exercises resumed, but the energy on the field had shifted. Maya moved with the same calm precision as before, but now every glance from her peers carried a mix of awe, fear, and uncertainty. During a live-fire exercise, she guided her squad through the terrain with methodical skill, demonstrating techniques that seemed almost instinctive. Her timing, her awareness, and her strategic decisions were flawless. Instructors watched silently, making subtle adjustments to the course to challenge her further, though none dared underestimate her. At one point, a young recruit hesitated, unsure of how to maneuver through a tricky obstacle. Maya didn't scold or correct him. Instead, she moved alongside him, demonstrating the motion with exact precision. "Keep your weight low," she instructed quietly. "Eyes on the target, not the obstacles. Trust your instincts." The young man executed her instructions flawlessly, eyes wide with disbelief. The field had become a place of learning, not ridicule, and Maya's presence had transformed it entirely. During a break, a small group of recruits finally approached her cautiously. We saw the file," one stammered. We didn't realize." Maya looked at them evenly, expression unreadable. "You don't need to understand," she said softly. "Just pay attention and learn, that's all that matters here." Her calm authority silenced any further questions. No one laughed. No one whispered. Her words, though few, carried weight far beyond their tone. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the general reappeared on the sidelines, observing the final drills of the day. He nodded subtly to the instructors, signaling that the lesson had been internalized. The recruits' behavior had changed, but the lesson was deeper than obedience. They were beginning to comprehend that skill, experience, and survival were far more important than ego, bravado, or mockery. Maya's quiet presence, reinforced by the knowledge revealed in the black file, had shifted the dynamic of the entire camp. Those who had mocked her scars now recognized them as symbols of endurance and resilience. Those who had doubted her skill now measured their own abilities against hers, understanding that she operated on a level they couldn't yet reach. That night, as the barracks settled into the hum of low conversation and restless sleep, Maya sat on her bunk, tracing the scars along her arms. Each line was a memory, a mission completed against impossible odds, a teammate rescued from certain death, a choice made in a moment that could have ended her life. The black file was proof, not to her, but to those who would now witness her capabilities firsthand. The recruits might never fully understand, but they would see it in action soon enough. The laughter of the past had been replaced by a quiet, tense awareness. The air was thick with anticipation, the knowledge that Maya Raines was no ordinary recruit, no ordinary soldier. She was someone who had walked through fire and emerged unbroken, someone whose experience and discipline could not be challenged, and someone whose scars told a story of survival far beyond their comprehension. As the lights in the barracks dimmed, Maya leaned back on her bunk, letting the weight of the day settle. She didn't gloat. She didn't seek recognition. She simply prepared quietly for the challenges ahead. The field had revealed part of her, the black file had revealed more, and soon the recruits would witness her abilities firsthand. The game was changing, and Maya Raines was firmly in control, silent, and unstoppable. The morning air on the fort training grounds was thick with tension. The previous day's revelations had settled over the recruits like a heavy fog, changing the dynamic of the camp entirely. Laughter was gone. Whispers had quieted into uneasy speculation. Today's live-fire drill was meant to test reflexes, coordination, and composure under stress, and it would prove, once and for all, why Maya Raines had earned the attention of General. The exercise began as planned. Teams navigated the dense terrain, ducking behind sandbags, advancing cautiously through simulated enemy positions, and maintaining strict tactical discipline. Maya's squad moved with seamless precision, her leadership quiet but unyielding. Every instruction was clear, concise, and executed without hesitation. The other recruits watched, both in awe and in disbelief, as she maneuvered through the field with a confidence and control that seemed almost unnatural. Halfway through the drill, disaster struck. One of the younger recruits, jittery and inexperienced, misfired his weapon near a row of fuel canisters set up for the exercise. The sharp crack echoed through the field, and the next moment a flare of fire erupted. Smoke and flames shot into the air, sending shrapnel-like debris across the ground. Panic instantly rippled through the ranks. Some recruits froze, others scattered blindly, and the instructors shouted over the chaos, trying to regain control. Maya's eyes narrowed. In a fraction of a second, her mind calculated every possible trajectory, every potential danger, and every action required to prevent catastrophe. Without hesitation, she sprinted forward. Her movements were fluid, almost predatory, her boots pounding the ground in precise rhythm. She dove into the smoke, ignoring the heat and the acrid stench, and reached the first injured recruit. Without a word, she grabbed his arm and hoisted him onto her shoulders, assessing his injuries as she ran. Her squad followed her lead, instinctively falling into formation around her, their fear tempered by the authority she radiated. The second recruit was pinned under a fallen obstacle, smoke and debris surrounding him. Maya didn't pause. She ripped the obstacle free with controlled force, stabilizing him before dragging him to safety. Her actions were methodical and efficient, a blend of tactical skill and raw strength honed by years of experience that no one here had yet imagined. The chaos of the live-fire drill had transformed into a controlled extraction under her command, her every move precise and purposeful. By the time the medics arrived, both injured recruits had been stabilized. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, but their injuries were survivable thanks entirely to Maya. The field had gone from pandemonium to order almost instantaneously, yet the other recruits stood frozen, staring. The mocking and doubting that had defined the past week now seemed ridiculous in comparison to the reality before them. This woman, and quiet, had turned a potentially deadly mistake into a controlled rescue with unmatched skill. One of the instructors finally approached, awe in his voice. How did you do that?" he asked, struggling to find the words. "Old habits," Maya replied softly, her tone neutral, almost dismissive, but carrying a weight no one could ignore. She adjusted her uniform, brushed soot from her gloves, and surveyed the field, as calm as if she had been walking through routine drills rather than near disaster. The general, observing from a safe distance, nodded subtly to himself. He had seen enough in his decades of military service to recognize mastery when it appeared, and this performance was mastery. It wasn't just survival skill. It was control under pressure, precision in chaos, leadership in the moment of extreme danger. The kind of skill that couldn't be taught in a classroom, couldn't be gleaned from manuals. It was innate, honed in shadows, tested in missions that officially never existed. As the smoke cleared and order returned, the recruits' reaction was a mix of awe and disbelief. Some lowered their heads, realizing how wrong they had been to mock her scars, to whisper behind her back. Others stared openly, trying to process the reality of what they had witnessed. The narrative they had built about her, fragile, inexperienced, mocked, shattered in a single, fluid demonstration of lethal competence. Later that afternoon, during the debriefing, the general addressed the training grounds. "Today, some of you witnessed skill and control under pressure that most of you won't see in your careers," he said, his gaze sweeping the group before settling on Maya. She handled a live-fire emergency that could have ended in disaster. The lives saved today are because of her experience, her training, and her calm under conditions that would break most soldiers. The recruit sat in stunned silence, absorbing his words. The message was clear. Maya Raines was no ordinary recruit. She had survived situations that would have destroyed anyone else, and she had done so with precision and control that expectation. Even among the instructors, murmurs of disbelief and respect circulated. Some had trained elite units before, but few had witnessed anything like this. Maya's background, hinted at in the black file, was beginning to make sense in the minds of those who had doubted her. Every scar, every mark of past pain had become evidence of skill, resilience, and survival. That night, as the recruits returned to the barracks, the atmosphere was palpably different. Whispers about the black file and the general's acknowledgement lingered, but they were now coupled with a newfound respect and cautious admiration. The field had witnessed not just skill, but mastery, and the recruits who had doubted her were forced to everything they thought they knew. Maya, meanwhile, remained quiet and composed. She did not bask in the recognition or the shift in perception. To her, today was simply another exercise in survival and control, another reminder of the standards she had set for herself long before she arrived at Fort. She traced a scar on her forearm, feeling the memory of the missions that had earned her those marks. Each line told a story. A mission completed under impossible odds, a teammate rescued from certain death, a choice made in the instant between life and death. Sleep came slowly that night. Maya lay on her bunk, reflecting on the events of the day. She knew the recruits had begun to see her differently, but she also knew that respect alone was not enough. The true measure of a soldier was not in recognition, but in action, in the ability to survive, lead, and execute under the most extreme conditions. The field had tested them today, but it had also revealed her strength in a way that words never could. Tomorrow would bring more drills, more challenges, and more opportunities for the recruits to learn the truth of who Maya Raines was. The mockery and whispers of the past were gone, replaced by quiet attention and nervous curiosity. Yet Maya remained focused on the future, on the next exercise, on the next challenge that would test skill, discipline, and endurance. She had survived worse than this. She had faced death, chaos, and betrayal in environments that would have broken anyone else, and she had emerged stronger, sharper, and unbroken. The recruits' eyes might now follow her every move, their respect grudging but growing, but Maya's focus remained unshaken. She was a soldier forged in shadows, trained in operations that didn't exist on paper, and today's live-fire drill had merely reaffirmed her mastery. As the lights dimmed in the barracks and the camp settled into a quiet hum, Maya allowed herself a moment of calm. The recruits would now begin to understand slowly that scars were not weaknesses but evidence of survival. Action spoke louder than whispers, and the field had spoken today. Maya Raines had emerged not just unscathed, but commanding, respected, and undeniable. The turning point had arrived, and it was only the beginning. The barracks were unusually quiet that evening. The events of the live-fire drill had left the recruits shaken, their earlier bravado replaced by nervous respect. For the first time, many of them stared at Maya Raines with something approaching awe. She moved with quiet confidence, performing routine checks on her gear, her scars catching the dim light as she worked, a silent reminder of the battles she had survived. None of the recruits dared approach her. None wanted to ask the questions that now burned in every mind. Who was she really? What had she done? The moment came that no one had expected. The barracks doors swung open with a sharp creak, and General entered, flanked by 2 aides. His presence immediately drew the attention of every soldier, the weight of authority palpable in the dimly lit room. The recruits snapped to attention, instinctively recognizing the seriousness of his visit. Maya didn't move. She remained at ease, calm and composed, as if this was just another day in the field, but even she could sense the gravity in the air. "Recruits," the general began, his voice carrying across the barracks with quiet authority. "Most of you have seen skill. Some of you have seen precision. Today, you've seen control under pressure, but none of that tells the full story of the woman standing among you." He paused, allowing the words to sink in, the silence stretching long enough to make every recruit's stomach tighten. Murmurs ran through the room. Some soldiers exchanged glances, trying to gauge the general's tone. Was this praise, a warning, a test? "The recruit before you," he continued, nodding subtly toward Maya, "is not here by chance. She has served in operations most of you can't even imagine. Missions classified beyond this base, missions that officially do not exist. His words were deliberate, precise, each one carrying weight that echoed through the room. She has operated behind enemy lines, led squads under fire, and completed assignments that would have been considered impossible. Her scars are not marks of weakness. They are badges of survival, earned in the most dangerous situations imaginable. A stunned silence fell over the recruits. Some sat frozen, their jaws slack, as they processed what the general had just revealed. The mockery, the jokes, the whispers all seemed absurd now. They had been laughing at a woman who had faced death and returned, time and time again. "She is former Tier 1 Black Ops," the general said, letting the words resonate. "Ghost Protocol Unit, Omega Section. Missions so secret that most of you have never heard of them. The lives she saved, the operations she led, the dangers she faced, all of it is classified. And yet, she has chosen to walk among you as a recruit, proving that even the best can start over, and that resilience is the ultimate measure of a soldier." The words hit the recruits like a physical blow. Faces that had once been filled with laughter and derision were now pale with realization. The woman they had mocked, the one they thought was fragile, was a legend in the truest sense of the word. Their respect, previously tentative and reluctant, transformed into awe. One of the younger recruits finally found his voice, whispering, "She's real." Another shook his head in disbelief, muttering, We can't, how is that possible?" Maya remained silent. She didn't need to respond. Her presence alone, the scars that mapped the history of her survival, the calm authority in her movements, all spoke louder than words. The general's acknowledgement was enough to shift the room completely. He continued, packing slowly in front of the group, his eyes sweeping over the recruits. "You have seen her act under fire. You have seen her lead, protect, and control. What you haven't seen is the countless operations where she succeeded without recognition, where her very existence was erased from history for the greater good. That is the kind of skill, discipline, and courage that earns respect beyond rank or title. That is the standard she sets for herself, and now for all of you." The recruits sat in stunned silence, the gravity of his words settling over them. Some struggled to comprehend that the woman they had underestimated, laughed at, and whispered about had a history filled with danger and triumph that they could barely imagine. They had mocked a legend without even knowing it. The general's gaze returned to Maya. "You requested to start over," he said quietly, almost conversationally. "You chose to walk among new recruits, to teach by example, to remind everyone here that true strength is forged in experience, not words. You've made them see what matters. They've learned that the measure of a soldier is action, not mockery, and respect is earned, not demanded." Maya's eyes met his, and for the first time a faint smile touched her lips. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it carried years of unspoken pride, endurance, and recognition. She didn't need the recruits to understand her fully. They would in time. For now, they had witnessed the turning point, the moment the myth and the reality converged. Whispers began to ripple through the recruits again, but this time they were different. "Did you hear that?" one said, voice trembling with awe. She's Black Ops." Another shook his head, muttering, "I can't believe I laughed at her." Eyes that had once darted away in fear now fixed on Maya, filled with a mixture of reverence and uncertainty. The dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Even the instructors, seasoned veterans of countless training programs, felt the weight of the revelation. Some exchanged glances, acknowledging quietly what they had always suspected, that Maya Raines was extraordinary. Her calm authority, her precise movements, her ability to remain composed under pressure were not just the results of rigorous training. They were the products of survival in the most extreme conditions, honed by missions that existed only in secrecy. As the general prepared to leave, he offered one final remark to the recruits. "Most of you will go through this training and never face the situation she has survived. Remember today. Remember her presence, her discipline, and her skill. And never forget, the strongest soldiers are those who endure when others fall. Respect is earned, action by action, not through words or titles." The convoy of black SUVs carried him away, leaving a heavy silence in the barracks. The recruits looked at one another, processing what they had just heard. The dynamic had shifted entirely. The woman they had laughed at, mocked, and underestimated was now untouchable, legendary, and undeniable. Maya returned to her bunk, quietly checking her gear once more. She traced a scar along her forearm, feeling the memories embedded within each line. Missions completed against impossible odds, comrades rescued from certain death, moments where instinct and training had collided to preserve life. The black file had revealed part of her past, but her actions had revealed the full extent of her capabilities. Respect had been earned, not demanded, and the recruits would now carry that lesson forward. As the lights dimmed and sleep settled over the barracks, Maya allowed herself a moment of reflection. The recruits would now see her differently. They would follow her lead, measure themselves against her example, and begin to understand that scars were not weaknesses but proof of survival and resilience. Her reputation, long hidden in secrecy, had begun to emerge. The game had changed, and Maya Raines had silently rewritten the rules. Tomorrow the field would test them again. But for now, respect had replaced mockery. Awe had replaced doubt. And Maya and Silent had emerged not just as a recruit, but as a legend walking among them, unbroken, untouchable, unstoppable. The following morning, Fort felt different. The air was charged with a strange mixture of tension and anticipation. The recruits who had once whispered, laughed, and mocked now carried themselves cautiously, eyes flicking toward Maya Raines as they moved across the training field. Even the instructors noticed the shift. Where there had been doubt and derision, there was now awe and a silent curiosity. Maya's reputation, forged in secrecy and scars, had begun to permeate every corner of the base. The day began with a complex tactical exercise designed to test teamwork, strategic thinking, and endurance. Recruits were divided into squads, each tasked with navigating a simulated hostile environment filled with obstacles, live fire elements, and unpredictable scenarios. Maya's squad was no exception, though today, the dynamic was fundamentally different. Her presence alone had transformed the attitude of the team. Fear and doubt had been replaced with attentiveness and discipline. As the drill commenced, Maya moved with fluid precision, her body controlled, her mind calculating. She was no longer just a participant. She had become the unspoken leader of the field. Her every command, subtle and deliberate, guided her squad seamlessly through the terrain. Recruits instinctively deferred to her judgment, responding immediately to her cues without hesitation. Left flank low and silent. Eyes sharp, she whispered, her voice calm but firm. Her squad adjusted instantly, moving as a cohesive unit, each member anticipating the other's actions as if rehearsed for months rather than hours. The other squads watched, both impressed and unnerved. The energy on the field had shifted completely. Recruits who had once laughed at her scars now studied her every movement, noting her precision, awareness, and the quiet authority that demanded obedience without overt commands. Even instructors, trained to detect flaws and assess skill, couldn't help but observe with a mixture of respect and disbelief. The scenario escalated quickly. Smoke grenades were deployed, simulated enemy fire crackled, and the terrain became treacherous with hidden pitfalls and obstacles. A younger recruit faltered, tripping over uneven ground and nearly falling into a mock hazard zone. Instantly, Maya was there, steadying him with a hand on his shoulder and guiding him to safety. Her actions were efficient, measured, and decisive. There was no hesitation, no drama, only precise execution. "You all right?" she asked quietly, not condescending but factual. The recruit nodded, shaken but unharmed. He looked at her with wide eyes, realizing that the woman he had mocked was the same one who had just saved him from potential disaster. The unspoken lesson was clear: trust in her judgment, follow her lead, and you would survive. The exercise continued, and the field became a living classroom. Maya demonstrated techniques that none of the recruits had mastered, using subtle adjustments in posture, timing, and positioning to improve efficiency. She moved like a ghost through the obstacles, her body perfectly calibrated for speed and precision. Every action was a lesson in skill and endurance. Gradually, other squads began to notice the change. Where once there had been individualism and ego-driven maneuvering, there was now a collective focus. Recruits who had previously relied on bravado started to emulate her movements, attempting to anticipate her decisions, striving to match her discipline. The entire training environment began to transform under her silent influence. By mid-morning, a critical scenario was introduced, a simulated hostage situation. Teams were tasked with navigating a heavily guarded compound, rescuing hostages, and neutralizing threats. Maya's squad executed flawlessly, moving with synchronized precision, clearing obstacles and extracting hostages without a single error. Observers were astonished. Each decision was executed with foresight, each movement calculated, each risk mitigated. In the midst of the exercise, one of the instructors called out, astonished, "She's teaching them by example without even trying." Indeed, Maya's influence was undeniable. The recruits were learning from her in ways that lectures or drills could never convey. Fear had been replaced with respect, doubt with focus, mockery with determination. Her scars, once the subject of ridicule, had become symbols of experience, resilience, and authority. As the day progressed, the exercises grew more complex, simulating multiple threats, environmental hazards, and dynamic decision-making scenarios. Maya's squad continued to excel, their movements so fluid and coordinated that even the instructors struggled to challenge them. The other squads, inspired yet wary, began to adjust their strategies, attempting to mimic her precision and foresight. During a final, high-intensity drill, the squad faced a situation where communication lines were intentionally disrupted, requiring silent coordination. Maya led through subtle gestures and eye contact, demonstrating that leadership and skill did not always require words. The squad executed flawlessly, rescuing hostages and neutralizing threats with a precision that bordered on the impossible. The instructors and observers were stunned. They had trained countless recruits over the years, but few had witnessed such seamless integration of skill, experience, and leadership in real time. Maya had not just completed the exercise, she had redefined the standards of excellence for the entire camp. After the drill, the general returned to observe the debriefing. He watched quietly as the recruits gathered, still processing the events of the day. Maya spoke briefly, her words measured but impactful. "Focus, discipline, awareness. Those are your tools. Skills will grow with practice, but character is proven under pressure. Remember that." Her words, though few, carried immense weight. Every recruit in the room listened intently, absorbing the lesson. They no longer saw her as merely a recruit with scars. They recognized her as a leader, a mentor, and a living example of the standards they aspired to reach. The shift was complete. The barracks, once a place of whispers, mockery, and doubt, had transformed into an environment of focus, respect, and determination. Recruits now approached each other with renewed discipline, inspired by the example Maya had set. Even the instructors admitted privately that they had underestimated the impact of one recruit on the entire training ecosystem. That night, as the barracks settled into quiet, Maya reflected on the day. She traced the scars on her arms, each one a reminder of past missions, challenges, and survival. The shift in the recruits had been subtle but profound. They had begun to see beyond superficial appearances, beyond mockery and whispers, and had recognized the essence of skill, resilience, and leadership. The general's words echoed in her mind. The strongest soldiers are those who endure when others fall. Maya had endured, she had led, and now she had reshaped the entire camp, not through orders but through action, presence, and example. The recruits had learned a vital lesson. Respect is earned, not demanded. Skill is demonstrated, not claimed. And leadership is shown through example, not words. Maya Raines, silent and unstoppable, had proven that beyond a shadow of a doubt. As sleep claimed her that night, Maya allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. The shift was complete. The camp had begun to follow her lead, to understand the true meaning of strength, and to recognize that actions, not appearances, define a soldier. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, the recruits had glimpsed the extraordinary, and the legend of Maya Raines had been firmly established. The dawn broke over Fort with a calm that belied the intensity of the past weeks. The training grounds, once chaotic with whispers, mockery, and tension, now hummed with a disciplined energy. The recruits moved with purpose, each step measured, each action deliberate, influenced by the quiet, unshakable presence of Maya Raines. Today was different. It wasn't just another drill. It was a culmination, a chance for the recruits to internalize the lessons they had observed. The field was alive with activity. Squads navigating obstacles, coordinating simulated missions, and testing skills honed through days of rigorous training. But the eyes of all present were drawn to Maya, who moved among them with the calm authority of someone who had faced the unthinkable and emerged unbroken. Her influence was evident in every motion. Where once soldiers stumbled over hesitation, now they acted decisively. Where once panic had rippled through the ranks, now confidence flowed like a current. The transformation was not instantaneous, but the seed of discipline and respect had been planted, nurtured by example rather than words. Maya's scars, visible and unhidden, had become silent symbols of endurance, proof that resilience could be forged in fire, tested in shadows, and revealed in moments of crisis. The general returned that morning to observe the final exercises, his presence commanding attention. He walked slowly along the observation line, nodding subtly at instructors and recruits alike, a faint, approving smile touching his face. When his gaze settled on Maya, there was a rare softness, a quiet acknowledgement of achievement. He had seen the change. He had seen the impact one soldier could have on many, and he had seen the legacy beginning to form. The final exercise of the day was a complex multi-squad scenario. Teams were tasked with securing a simulated high-value target, rescuing hostages, and neutralizing threats while navigating treacherous terrain. The operation required coordination, communication, and leadership under pressure. Maya's squad, as expected, led the charge with unmatched efficiency. Every movement was precise, every decision calculated. The recruits followed her lead instinctively, their focus sharpened by the lessons they had absorbed over the past week. During the operation, a sudden complication arose. Smoke grenades detonated in an unexpected pattern, obscuring vision and creating chaos. A young recruit panicked, freezing in place as simulated gunfire crackled around him. Without hesitation, Maya moved. She placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him, and guided him through the confusion with calm, unwavering authority. Her actions were seamless, almost effortless, a living lesson in leadership under fire. The scenario reached its climax as Maya's squad reached the final objective. Hostages were secured, threats neutralized, and the mission completed without a single casualty. Observers watched in awe as the recruits, once uncertain and timid, now moved with confidence, precision, and a sense of unity that had been absent before. The transformation was undeniable. The general stepped forward as the exercise concluded. "Today," he said, his voice carrying across the field, "you have witnessed more than skill and discipline. You have witnessed leadership. You have seen the embodiment of resilience, courage, and expertise. This is what it means to follow and to learn. Maya Raines has not only proven herself, she has taught you all how to become better soldiers, better teammates, and better people." The recruits, still catching their breath, absorbed his words. For many, it was a moment of revelation. The lessons learned were no longer abstract. They were tangible, embodied in the movements, decisions, and calm presence of a woman who had walked through danger far beyond anything they had imagined. As the day ended and the sun dipped below the horizon, the recruits gathered in the barracks for a final debrief. Maya stood quietly at the front, her posture straight, her expression composed. She didn't speak much, allowing the general to summarize the events. But when she did, her words were simple, precise, and impactful. "Discipline, focus, and awareness," she said, her voice steady. "Those are the tools you carry with you. Skills will grow, but character is proven under pressure. Respect is earned action by action. Remember that." Her words were received with a mixture of reverence and resolve. The recruits had begun to understand that true leadership was not about authority or rank, but about influence, example, and the courage to act when it mattered most. Maya's presence had rewritten the standards of the training environment, and her legacy was now being absorbed by those she had led. Later that evening, in the quiet of her bunk, Maya reflected on the journey. The black file had revealed a fragment of her past, her skills had been tested in chaos, and her leadership had reshaped the camp. Yet, the most important measure of success was not recognition or praise. It was the change she had inspired in others. The recruits would carry the lessons forward, applying them in ways she might never witness. That was her true legacy. The barracks, once filled with whispers of doubt and laughter, had transformed into a place of respect and determination. Recruits now spoke with confidence, moved with purpose, and understood that true skill was demonstrated through action, not words. Instructors acknowledged her impact, realizing that leadership could be quiet, yet immeasurably powerful. As night settled over Fort, Maya traced the scars on her arms, each one a story of survival, resilience, and experience. They were reminders of missions completed, lives saved, and challenges overcome. But more than that, they were symbols of what she had taught, that strength is measured by endurance, skill is proven through action, and respect is earned through example. The legacy of Maya Raines was no longer hidden in classified files or whispered rumors. It had become tangible, alive in the movements, decisions, and attitudes of every recruit she had influenced. The camp had been transformed, not by words or authority, but by the quiet, undeniable presence of a soldier who had walked through fire and emerged unbroken. The next morning, the recruits would wake to continue training, but the lesson would remain. Every step, every decision, and every action would carry the imprint of her influence. Maya had not just survived the past, she had shaped the future, leaving a legacy that would endure long after the drills and exercises were completed. And as Maya stood on the edge of the training field, watching the recruits navigate obstacles and challenges, she allowed herself a rare, faint smile. The game had changed. The field had transformed. Respect had replaced mockery, discipline had replaced chaos, and awe had replaced doubt. Maya Raines had proven that scars were not signs of weakness, but symbols of survival, resilience, and power. Her legacy was secure.